Dave.
Okay.
Okay, I think we are on the air. Good evening. This is Peter Beardmore, Chairman of the Finance Committee, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Tonight we have 5 members physically present for this evening's meeting, which meets our requirements under the open meeting law. We have 1 member participating remotely, Dave Passios, who's participating via Zoom. And therefore, any votes that we take this evening will be by roll call vote. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is also provided for members of the public who would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the Zoom app using meeting ID 818-620-86442, or from a telephone, dial toll-free 888-475-4499 and enter webinar ID 818-620-86442#. If you have not registered with Zoom, you'll be asked for a name and an email address. Note that no participant ID is needed, just press pound when asked. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raised hand feature to request to speak. Okay, I think I've called the meeting to order. Are there any announcements? Okay, seeing none. I have 2 announcements that came over via email this week that I'd like to make the public aware of. First is an email that went town-wide from the town manager, which is a notification that there will be a 40B workshop on August 3rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. at the Middle High School auditorium. The town council, Adam Costa, will lead the workshop by presenting an overview of the 40B process, the roles and responsibilities of relevant boards, and a question and answer period. And I assume the public is welcome to attend. If the members of the Finance Committee prefer to attend, I'm thinking that we would probably want to make sure that we're posted for that meeting. I'm assuming, and I'm looking at the town manager, I'm assuming that the select board will probably post for that meeting. Okay. So I will post for that meeting, and if we don't have a quorum, we won't call it to order, and we'll be good with the governor.
And town council said other boards don't need to post for the meeting. It's attendance at a workshop.
Okay.
There's no deliberation by the...
So we don't need to post?
You don't need to post for it. The board will post the meeting as their meeting.
Okay.
Which there'll be a comment period at the end. We're still within the 30-day comment period.
Okay. So for those of you listening and participating from home, the town manager has just advised that, town council has advised that because it is a public meeting that will be posted by the Board of Selectmen, we do not need to post for that meeting. There will be a comment period at the end of that meeting, and we are still within the time frame for collecting public and board comments on the 40B project. Also, an email from the town manager. This is just a public awareness message that the new owners of the Gulf Station at 451 Mass Ave have invited to share an invitation for their grand opening on Tuesday, August 3rd through Thursday, August 5th, with a ribbon cutting ceremony on Wednesday, August 4th at 11 a.m. So for members of the public and members of the board who wish to attend, you are cordially invited by them and by me. Assuming there are no other announcements, is there any public comment? Any public comment from the board? Seeing none, Any public comment from the public? Seeing none, we will move on. Town Manager and Finance Director report. One comment that I'm going to make, since this is my first meeting that I've actually planned to be chairman, one of the procedural changes I'm going to try to keep up with over the course of the year is I'm going to front load town manager related responsibilities to the beginning of the meeting. More often than not, I suspect that she will be needed for the entire meeting, but in the event that she isn't, if we need to workshop something and she doesn't need to be here, she spends plenty of time here and we'll let her go home and not wait for the town manager report to be at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I would ask the same to be extended to the finance
Of course,
director.
of course.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
evening.
And, nice to meet the new members of the committee. Welcome. So a couple of updates tonight. The governor signed the fiscal 22 state budget, and DLS released our cherry sheet numbers. The overall impact is we will have a $126,551 deficit at the moment. We're watching our new growth figures, and hopefully that will help offset any deficit overall. But we are planning on a fall special town meeting to make any adjustments that are needed to the budget.
When our unappropriated number was in excess of that number, wasn't it?
The school choice number, that was the large.
No, I understand.
So-
Let me,
Sorry.
I want to get to that in a second. 'Cause
Oh,
I do want the public to
unappropriated,
be
yes. It's
clear.
the estimate we used for local aid, which is not an appropriation number. It's,
I understand that, but we have an unappropriated excess going into this fiscal year that Karen's shaking her head. So
No.
this is a deficit we're going to have to deal with. Okay.
yeah. I assume you're talking about free cash? The
I was actually talking about unappropriated.
No.
No,
No.
okay. All right.
20,
20 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Good deal. All right. And you got into the school choice issue. So
Mm-hmm.
the issue is either our inbound or outbound school choice numbers are not favorable, right? Is that the?
right. The estimates must have been the number of kids utilizing school choice is greater than what had been in the past.
Okay.
Also, we received notification from our legislators that the 40,000 earmark went through the state budget, and that was for the project for the LED lighting at the library. That was one of the projects that was on the prioritized list to our legislators. Pay-as-you-throw bags, I'm sure everyone's been watching those meetings. That decision was made at the last select board's meeting, and that increase will be a 15% increase in bag costs, and that will go into effect around mid-August. And there was substantial amount of discussion about offering a senior relief program for a free roll of bags, but in the end, ultimately, because they would have seen, once they went through the bags, they would still have realized a 30% increase in bag costs with that. So the decision was to just maintain with a 15% bag increase. What else? Just as an FYI, if this has any budgetary impact in the future, once this position is filled, our veterans agent has resigned, and that will be effective August 31st. So we're currently doing a search to fill that position. And that is a stipended position within the budget that we appropriate $5,000 a year for. Other updates, I met with a number of department heads and also a member of the MRPC today, our Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, as they have a lot of interaction with municipalities about regional programs. And our meeting revolved around the ARPA money and what possible eligible projects, programs that the town could potentially use the money for. So we discussed items such as broadband, stormwater projects that would have an impact on improving water quality, costs related to the Police Reform Act, environmental remediation of certain parcels in town, and among other things. So I'll have a more detailed list as I put all those notes together from that meeting.
What do you anticipate the timeline will be in terms of how that decision gets made and when does it get made? Is there a deadline even for this?
There is a deadline for use of the funds, which is fiscal '23. And so the timeline is going to revolve around a couple things. After our initial review of possible projects, I'm going to send out, there's an email for the U.S. Treasury as far as they're the ones that make the decision on whether it's an eligible expense or not. So there are some questionable items they're not clear through the guidance whether they would be eligible. So make that initial pass to see even if we need to do a further review if they're a potential project. And then it's vetting out the cost of all the other ideas. So, for instance, the broadband. So that's going to take some time to work with Verizon and Comcast, see if it's a possibility, what it entails, the cost. Precursors for this, in my opinion, would be that this doesn't add a burden to the town. It doesn't exceed the funding that we have available. It's not an additional burden on our staff, that it's actually an aid to operations. And so right now, as everyone I'm sure has heard, hiring people is very difficult. We have a number of different openings that even getting applicants for is difficult enough. So to create some new position that we don't actually have something already a resource that we could use, I'd like to steer clear of that. So those, I would say, were the parameters of and timeline. There's no complete timeline, but
Okay. So this may be something that we can discuss later in, items for future meetings and maybe even get to the point where we've got some level of rigor of when we come back to this question and maybe have a more open discussion about this, maybe even ask the public for comment on it. You and I had a conversation on this topic yesterday about the definition of infrastructure, because it is one of the three areas that the language of the act is written around. But infrastructure is defined by the act is fairly limited, right? It's water, sewer, broadband,
stormwater.
So if we wanted to, for example, make enhancements to Marshall Park with this money, that would probably sit outside of the limitations of the.
That would be one of those questions that I would like to get advice from the U.S. Treasury on. There's, I think there are community improvements as part of that guidance, as well as environmental remediation. So we have a couple properties that would apply to. So, but I'd like to get that clear answer before going further.
Okay.
Bridges and culverts could be covered under infrastructure, right?
Stormwater related, and that's a good question, because as far as bridges and culverts.
Good.
Any other questions or comments related to ARPA? Okay. It's a hot topic. It's a good topic that I think we should have a thorough discussion around.
Yes. I think I've updated the committee on all the other items that we had discussed previously, the last meeting. Is there anything that you had questions for me on, or?
Back to the school choice, do they have the numbers of school in, school out? Is that all now posted online? And because that was like a last minute change. I was in conference that number changed.
And you looked at the DESI.
I looked at the DESI numbers, yeah. Really, I don't have the numbers here, but if you look at the actual increases from what we actually paid in FY '21 versus what the numbers are budgeted at in FY '22, there's not much of an increase. It's kind of level. But the issue was when the governor originally did his budget proposal, the number that he used for choice was the number that was estimated on the FY '21 cherry sheet, which that number, our actual expenditures for FY '21 were higher than that. So the big difference is the fact that in the governor's proposal, he used an estimate from '21, and he didn't look at what was actually, or at the time that the budget was put together, they weren't looking at the actual numbers. So what happened was our school choice
This meeting is being
sending,
recorded.
our school choice sending tuition actually went up $119,308, but if you looked at that number and compared it to what we actually paid, it's about, I think, 5,000, so it's not a significant increase. So I think the issue was that the governor used estimated numbers and not actuals when the budget was put together. So there hasn't been a huge flux in the numbers from FY '21 to FY '22 as far as enrollment. It's more the numbers that we used when the governor set his budget.
Does that mean there was an increase from 20 to 21?
I don't have that in front of me. I can get you that information.
Just wondering what the...
I have, the numbers I have in front of me are just comparing '21 to '22. I don't have '20 in front of me, but I can certainly get you that information. I think I gave that was part of the historical stuff that I think I sent to you. I probably have it on my computer. Let me see if I can find it, and if I can, I'll get back to you.
Okay. Okay, committee assignments. During our last episode, we had a discussion around committee assignments, where we went through a list of committee assignments that historically the members of the Finance Committee have divvied up as liaisons or representative members to different boards and commissions. For example, I believe last week we reappointed Mr. Passios to the TC Passios Committee. And we also went through a list of other committees that include School Committee, Acquisition Committee, which is an assignment, not a liaison, but that's an ad hoc committee. Capital Planning, also an assignment. Did we get a clarification on the term on that? I think I was supposed to ask the town clerk, and I didn't. Dave, did you have any conversation on that?
It's a 3-year term, and I'm in the second year if I'm reappointed now.
Okay, so let me come back to that, but the question that I'll ask is are there any objections to in the committee for Dave just continuing that position? Fire and Police, DPW, which are liaison roles, Green Communities, which I believe is a liaison role, Council on Aging, liaison role, Planning, liaison role, Parks, liaison role, although Dave is an elected member of that committee. Dave, I'm assuming you would be willing to continue to be a liaison to that committee as well?
Yeah, definitely, I can bring anything that needs to be
Yep.
brought to finance for parks.
Sewer, recently we have not filled that as a liaison, but it is available. And then Association of Town Finance Committees, and Mass Municipal Association. So, with that, Jay, you're giving an inquisitive look. Have I forgotten something?
No, I'm just trying to remember them all in my head.
Okay, all right. So, probably the best way to start here, rather than the awkward pauses when I ask who wants to be liaison to the Council on Aging or something like that, is Do any members have any preferences in terms of committees that they are compelled to be liaisons to? Let's start there. Or have an interest even, not even compelled.
Well,
Peter,
for me,
as you mentioned
I would do,
Earlier, I'd like to stay with capital planning. That's up to the.
Yeah, so okay, so thank you for reminding me, Dave, because my short-term memory is clearly gone, and I forget 2 minutes later. Does anybody have any objection to Dave continuing to serve in the post for capital planning?
No.
Okay. So Dave, congratulations.
Dave, are you still on Green Communities?
When we get reappointed, yeah, it's, the task force is in place until we are appointed to the standing committee, which is going to happen August 10th. But I'm actually a member of that committee, I'm not a liaison.
Okay, so I would propose that we pause on green communities until the committee is established and reappointed and we figure out who's serving on it, rather than being redundant in that one. Good catch, Jay. Okay.
So can I ask Evan, I think Evan was on a couple now.
Well, he's not here, so we're putting him on sewer and
School.
School. Sorry, Evan.
I'm kidding.
The longest meetings.
I'm sorry, you were going to say, Tom.
No, I was just gonna say, how do we deal with that since he's not here?
I don't know.
And do we give him just keep him on?
Well, let's see who wants to do what first amongst the members who are here, and then we'll retrench. We don't have to complete this tonight either. We have to
Yeah.
eventually figure it out. So, Tom Gray, did you have something that you wanted to?
well, land acquisition would be something I could do.
Okay. Chris, you had expressed some interest in
No,
that.
that's fine.
All right.
I mean,
Yep.
And Peter, that's a seat on that committee, correct? It's not a liaison.
Yeah, so the Land Acquisition Committee is an ad hoc committee, so it only forms when there is a land acquisition opportunity, typically under chapter. But we will need to appoint a member of that ad hoc committee. So it is a seated voting member of that committee.
So I think last time we talked about open space and whether it made sense for that to be the same person. And that was the one I had expressed
Okay.
potential interest in.
Why didn't I write that down? I don't think that they need to be the same. But Tom, are you interested in, figure that out amongst yourselves and.
I'm fine with him.
Tom, are you okay with open space?
sure, yeah. If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. Okay. Anybody else have any desires or interests?
Well, I know Evan's on fire and police. I would be interested in that, but, so we may have to wait and talk to him.
I would not be against appointing you to fire and, so first of all, that is not a position where you have to attend a regular meeting.
Okay,
That's pick up the phone and schedule meetings with the chiefs
okay,
once or twice a year. And by the way, there's nothing preventing any finance committee member from doing that. In fact, I intend to do that with several of the department heads this year myself. So, if you want that, I would not, and he having done that, I wouldn't hesitate to
okay.
assign you to that. If anybody else has any objection or concern, please speak now or forever hold your peace. What about school committee?
Isn't that your favorite?
Well, so I would be happy to continue to serve as a liaison to the school committee. As has been noted here, they do tend to have rather long meetings.
Yeah.
They meet on the more or less opposite weeks from us, so they meet every other Wednesday, and it works with my schedule. It's not that big of a deal. But I've done it for a couple of years and would be happy to pass the torch if somebody else is interested. If not, Mrs. Archambault and I will just be hanging out another night each week. No? All right. Well, I will gladly take that for another year. I'm sure the members of the school committee will be very excited to see my smiling face again.
Always happy.
Yeah. Okay, DPW.
I'll do DPW and sewer.
Okay. I'm sure the sewer commissioners would be glad to see and hear from you. Okay. So I would also volunteer, and I think it's probably appropriate as chairman to be the liaison to Association of Town Finance Committees and MMA. I haven't reached out to them at this point, but I would be glad to do that if you guys were interested. Or, if anybody else is interested, I'd be glad to defer as well. Okay.
Makes sense.
And so amongst those that are left are Council on Aging and, speaking of long meetings, Planning Board.
And library.
And Library.
Library.
How did I miss that one too? Yes. So I don't know that we have, if we have seated those. So Heather was the Council on Aging liaison last year. I don't recall if we had a library or planning liaison.
Heather was the library too,
She was.
She was? Okay,
according to the minutes.
okay,
I would do library.
okay.
My family's there several times a week, every week, so.
Well, a high-volume user, I think, would be a good thing. Chris, any interest in COA?
Sure. I still can't join, but I can.
You and I are not that far away.
I get their newsletters.
Me too, yeah, well, that's a finance committee thing, I think. Everybody who sees their newsletters on my kitchen table are like, really? Okay, so the only obvious one that is missing then is Planning Board. And I would be okay if we did not seat a liaison to the Planning Board, but if anybody is interested, you are welcome to be that person. Okay, so let me go through this again, and then, because there are some that are voting members, I think we should take a roll call vote on this.
Did Evan get anything?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh,
Sounds like we have a planning board.
Evan, if you're watching this on tape, let's,
We can ask him next time.
yeah, let's leave it, and then
Yeah.
we'll twist his arm next time. That's a good one. Okay, so right now, and once I read through this, I will ask somebody to move per my description. School Committee, Peter Beardmore. Land Acquisition Committee, Tom Gray. Capital Planning, Dave Passios, which is effectively a reappointment to an existing term. Police and Fire, Tom Baelish. DPW, Jay Simeone. We're tabling Green Communities. Council on Aging, Chris Menard. Parks, Dave Passios. Sewer, Jay Simeone. Association of Town Finance Committees, Peter Beardmore. Mass Municipal Association, Peter Beardmore. Library, Tom Baelish. And Open Space Committee, Tom Gray. Anything I missed or got wrong?
Peter, the only thing we're missing off that list, and it was informal, was cemeteries. and I have not been able to attend one of their
Cemetery.
meetings for quite a while now.
Okay, what I would suggest is, Dave, are you interested in that, or do we want to inquire as to what's up with the DPW and the Cemetery Commission and get the details in terms of what the meeting schedule is?
I
And
think the Cemetery Commission would like a direct link to the Finance Committee. It's just that the timing on their meetings and others, as you know, the other committees I'm involved in, it just
Yep.
hasn't worked for the last 8 months or so.
Okay, what I would propose is that we not assign that tonight, and we revisit it when Evan is here, and perhaps we have Dave in person, and maybe a discussion with the chairman of the Cemetery Commission and/or the DPW director.
Bill Tyler.
Okay. Okay, do I hear?
I have
one?
a question. So we have a commission of trust funds, which I don't think they have a quorum, right? They don't have enough for a quorum. What trust funds do they trust?
Our annual report too, a list of the funds.
Well, there's a list of all the trust funds, but, the school has scholarship funds that are in the trust funds, which they have control over. The library has control over their trust funds. The Conservation Commission has control over their trust funds. There aren't a lot left, and I can tell you right now, there's very little activity out of any of those funds. I think maybe, I want to say 20 years ago, we probably gave some money to a resident in town to do some roof repairs on their home or something like that, but typically, if there was money that was requested from one of those funds, they would go to the trust fund commissioners, and the approval process would start with them. But, like I said, we very seldom use any of those funds that the trust fund commissioners would have control over.
These aren't like the revolving.
No,
Right.
no, 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 they're
Totally.
part of our trust fund portfolio with Bartholomew. Yep, yep.
And it's in the annual
Can I ask
report?
roughly how
It's in
much
the
money
annual
is,
report, yep.
inactive? Thanks.
Say again, Dave, we didn't hear you.
Yeah, just wondering how much money roughly are in those inactive accounts. I know some of them are very small.
The question that he asked is, do you know how much money is in the inactive?
Off the top
accounts?
of my head, no, but I can send you the June 30th, 2021 quarterly report, so you can review that.
Okay.
Yep.
What's
Great, thank you.
what's the purpose of the funds?
Of the trust funds?
Yeah.
There's all different ones. I mean, we have, well, there's a lot of scholarship funds, but we have like some of the names of them that I can think of off the top of my head is like we have a Worthy Poor Fund. We have, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I don't know, they have really weird names, and they've been around forever and very seldom used, so, I mean, I'll forward you the year-end report so you can see what's in there.
Years ago, the biggest one was the Chester Mossman one, right? That was
Yeah.
that was a trust fund that was ultimately used.
Oh, that was for the, yeah,
That was
yeah,
used to complete what is now the Boys and Girls Club.
yeah, and we have a
Which
larger
was,
one
you know,
that's
basically,
used.
that was like money that was left by somebody who, you know, in his will
Yeah.
to the town for future, at the time, it was intended to be agricultural education use, but we used it for a different purpose, so.
Okay.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the slate that I just read?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion from Chris Menard, a second from Jay Simeone. This will be a roll call vote. Dave Passios,
Aye.
Chris Menard,
Aye.
Jay Simeone,
Aye.
Tom Gray,
Aye.
Tom Baelish,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Unanimous. Okay. 40B commentary to mass housing. Before we begin this discussion, I'd like to ask the town manager to update us on the schedule, because I know that there have been some changes on this since our last meeting in terms of commentaries and site
Yes.
visits and that sort of thing.
Yes, so the initial site visit for the relevant boards was scheduled for July 8th. We asked for a different date because it was too soon and a popular vacation week for a lot of people. So that date was finalized as July 28th at 1 p.m. That's not a public meeting. That's just for the relevant boards that are dealing with the permit themselves, and that's outlined by the CMR on 40B. The workshop, like you mentioned earlier in the meeting, is August 3rd. Attorney Adam Costa will be there to present, do an overview, just explain the process, the roles and responsibilities of all the relevant boards, especially the ZBA, and there'll be a Q&A for process questions, policy, procedural questions, and then a comment period at the end. So we can gather as many comments. We've already started to receive a number of comments on this project.
So and the comments are due when?
Comments are due August 10th. That will give us sufficient time to put together the comprehensive letter in our comment period, which is due to the state by the 16th.
Okay.
So I expect that the select board, this will be on their August 10th agenda to discuss the content of the letter and review all the comments that have been received.
Okay. So specific to the comment document that the town will that the town will submit. I would imagine committees like the planning board will have substantial commentary. There may be commentary from the sewer commission, from the DPW, from the water department.
The police
Water
department,
district.
the school department.
Are those comments identified by the originator, or do they become a roll-up of comments on behalf of the town of Lunenburg?
There'll probably be a roll-up of comments, identified areas of concern that the town has.
Okay.
And does the ZBA arbitrate those?
They shouldn't
No.
be the one, yeah, I would advise that they not comment on.
That they not comment?
Yeah, so these comments go to Mass Housing. They obviously become part of the record that the ZBA could consider, I would imagine, or be resubmitted to the ZBA. But the ZBA will not will not open this until Mass Housing has approved the site, correct?
Right.
So
This
who
is a
determines
site
which
eligibility process.
Yeah, so who determines which comments go forward? Is that the select board or town manager or?
It will be discussed, I am expecting at the select board's meeting, so a comprehensive letter.
So this is a committee discussion and a committee decision. I can tell you that, and I shared this with the town manager yesterday, my bias as a finance committee member on this is not to comment. And my thinking behind it is that this is a topic that is going to get, it already has had quite a bit of discussion and contextual history and information, particularly at the planning board. And anything that we were to comment on from a fiscal perspective, I feel as if it would be premature and speculative. So let me give you an example. I personally think that the pro forma that is in the application underestimates the infrastructure costs that are going to be necessary for this project to take place. We need to run, or they will need to run, water and sewer up 2 roads, 3 roads, to get there. And I think that there's a case that at least 2 of those roads and 2 intersections will need substantial improvements to accommodate the traffic load that this development is likely to bring on. I don't know if the expectation is from Mass Housing or the petitioner that the town would pick up those costs. But I also don't know what those costs would be. Like, I have literally no idea. They could be 3 million, they could be 30 million. I have no idea. And so I feel at this point that, you know, I don't feel qualified to weigh in other than this seems way out of whack. And maybe that's an adequate comment, is this thing seems way out of whack from a financial perspective and from an infrastructure requirement. But I feel like the DPW, the planning board, like those are functions that can weigh in with a great deal more expertise than I can, or we can as a board. But I certainly defer to the rest of the board for discussion, because I'm just one member and one opinion.
I can tell you that we've already started to receive comments from, like the police department, just done a traffic study. I know the superintendent will be providing comment about the impact on schools, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the estimate that we got from last meeting on the impact to the schools was way understated. Trying to draw a correlation between what was done in the prior projects for school-age children versus this one. I would envision 400 children entering the school, 2 per unit on average.
Oh, I think I think, in my experience, that is not correct. So let me give you some color on this, just from my own experience. I was on the ZBA I mentioned at our last meeting when we heard our first 40B. It started I want to say we started working on it in 03 and approved it in 05. And there's a $15,000 grant that comes with these projects. We bring in a consultant to kind of help us work through the hearing process and the negotiation with the developer. And the consultant at the time said, by and large, 2-bedroom apartments yield 1 student per 10 apartments at the time. And nobody believed it. Nobody believed it. But she had her numbers across a variety of similar developments all over the state that showed that